I think you have the right mindset to make this coding bootcamp successful. I just really want to reemphasize, do not.
A couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of sitting down with Don Hansen. Don runs the Don the Developer YouTube channel, where he helps new developers get started and junior developers grow into a higher paying position. Don and I sat down to talk about my jump into the coding bootcamp world. I had a few specific questions for him regarding bootcamp and how to navigate the whole experience. So we'll just jump right into the video. The first question I had for him pertained to knowing when to start focusing on applying for jobs versus grinding out leak code problems or working on projects full time. It really had to do with just how to balance those several things that are worth considering when getting into the job market. So here's the clip from that.
I don't think there's an official benchmark or line in the sand where you cross it and now let's go hardcore with the interviews. One thing I'm concerned about is there are a lot of people in your shoes. They get into a coding bootcamp, they want to hit the ground running. That's important to them. The problem is I see so many people pull their focus away from the learning, from the coding bootcamp's process. And I see that being more of a detriment. My big recommendation, like my main recommendation, is just follow the process with the coding bootcamp, hit up admissions before you even get into it. What you can do, because every coding bootcamp, you got to supplement something. If they aren't heavy with project work, especially with the second half, you can build your own project. Think about the things that you've been learning. What can I build to go ahead and reinforce these concepts? And you can kind of just build it on the side a little bit. And this project, you don't really need to build features that make sense. You just need to build features that reinforce what you're learning. This isn't the type of project that's going to be this amazing portfolio project. Like, you've also asked a question, like, when do I know to like really start applying and pushing forward with that? The coding bootcamp to career services is probably going to let you know about that. I would just push that more towards the end of the program. You're going to build projects probably throughout the program. Your projects are going to evolve into more kind of like products, portfolio ready projects that solve a real problem that is going to be directly translatable. But to like when you start like really preparing and going heavy into the interview process as well, it's going to start off slow. It's kind of just like a little bit of a curve. You start off slow, a few applications maybe. You know, like 3 applications a week, you're doing company research, cover letter, and then you let that progress into, like, if you're applying, then you're kind of still going hardcore with projects, but, you know, then it's maybe up to 15 applications. If you're applying full time, it's up to 15 applications per week. I would cap it at that and just do heavy project work.
Honestly, this first answer gave me so much value up front that we could have maybe just even ended the video right there. That was like one of the golden nuggets in the entire interview. I don't think I had considered the cohesiveness and the fullness of what a coding bootcamp is going to entail. And this really reminded me to kind of trust the process that I've signed up for through the coding bootcamp. I think I was a bit hesitant to give the coding bootcamp his trust just because of my default tendency to want to control outcomes. But ultimately, if I'm going to trust myself to attend this bootcamp in the first place and trust my decision to move forward with it, then I know I've done enough vetting to understand that the bootcamp is going to take me through most of what I need to do in order to get a job, and I can fill in those gaps as I go along. You know, like he said, there's going to be deficiencies, so I'm planning on that. But instead of taking myself out of the process of the bootcamp, I'm going to be making sure that instead I'm spending my extra time studying the gaps that aren't filled by the bootcamp as I come across them, rather than trying to anticipate them up front and fill them in before I even realize that there's a deficiency in that area.
I'm sure I'll get some insight from this from my bootcamp as well. Do you recommend building a portfolio completely from scratch, doing, you know, just throwing boilerplate in there and getting all of the UX and all of the functionality built out? Do you sometimes recommend using templates, or is it a mix of the two?
I asked this second question because I've heard some conflicting information on the internet about portfolios, and I wanted to get his opinion on this. I really want to be in a position where I have a portfolio that holds all of my work together as quickly as possible while also balancing the quality. So that's kind of where the potential of templates comes in. I want to be able to have a product up or a portfolio up as quickly as possible without negatively impacting how employers are going to see me.
I think it's really important to care about UX. I think it's really, like, you don't have to be a designer. You don't have to design this amazing portfolio, but you need to understand, like, professional front-end developers care about the content they're displaying on the page. They have that context in mind. I think a lot of companies hiring for front end, they're going to care about that you put that effort in. Learning a little bit, like becoming a little bit UX savvy is very important for a front end developer, even in just the communications you're going to have with the designer. You showing that you care about that kind of thing, and at least making, spacing is consistent with your portfolio, and like the color contrast is I can read it. Like focusing on things like that matters. So I would focus on the basics and fundamentals if you can. I don't think your design needs to be amazing. If you want to go with a templated approach, that's fine. I think like the portfolio itself, I think should speak a little bit to your personality, which is where templates can take away from that. But it's the most uninteresting project you're going to be building as well. And so if you have a focus to like really double down on this other project that you think is very impressive, and like you're able to like have a really constructive conversation about all the features and why you built those features, like what problems they actually solve, how you implemented them in the interview, that's an important conversation. So it's like, should you build a portfolio and get a little bit savvy with UX and kind of like add your own flavor to it? Yes, that can benefit you, but it's not the thing that's going to bring you the most value.
This bit was insightful for me. I think I've overthought my portfolio and underthought my projects in general. I've spent more time thinking about what I want my portfolio to look like than actually what problems I want to solve with my projects in the real world. So this is a good reminder for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely going to be putting a lot of time into making my portfolio look great. This was a reminder though that companies care about real world applications. How are you solving problems? What real world problems are you solving, and how are you going about solving those problems? Unless I'm applying for a designer position, they're not going to be asking me a ton of questions about the user experience or the user interface of my portfolio website in particular. And if they were, I would spend more time on projects that involve those specific aspects of developing.
Speaking to the emphasis on front end or back end, the bootcamp I'm going to is definitely front end emphasized. Do you typically recommend that people try to get a relatively deep understanding of both sides of the tech stack, or specifically juniors, or do you recommend going much deeper into one or the other?
You're going to keep going as deep as you need to go until you figure out what you want to do. And that's the extent. That's as far as you're going to go. Ideally, would it be beneficial for you to learn the full stack? Sure. And I think having context of the entire full stack is important. It's going to improve your communication with backend developers. It's going to you're going to understand more context, and it's just going to make you a better developer. And you're also going to learn different patterns on the backend versus front end usually. So can it benefit you? Yes. Is that going to be the most efficient way of landing your first job? Probably not. Like there's so much depth in the front end. There's so much depth in the back end to be competitive. Right. The problem is when people graduate, they make the mistake of doubling down on the full stack. They don't pick one still. And that's where developers kind of shoot themselves in the foot with that.
To be competitive, I think this is the sentiment that really matters here. I'm glad that my bootcamp is teaching me full stack, but I'm going to be learning and dialing my focus in on either the front or the back end. I'm going to double, triple, quadruple down on one of those ends because the depth at which you can go into on either end is immense. I want to be as competitive as possible when I enter the job market, which is why I'm going to niche down more specifically into one of the sides of development and really focus on becoming good or great at one of those sides. From what I've been able to see, just from looking out on the market in general, it seems more important to have an understanding of the full stack, but a deep understanding of one of the sides so that you can communicate with everybody involved in the design process, but differentiate yourself from within your specific role. The next question I asked Don was about his ideas and approach to entrepreneurial or freelance opportunities after bootcamp. Here's what he had to say about that.
I don't think it's something that you should focus on initially. If you get into freelancing, there are even coding bootcamps that will claim you'll become a freelance developer, you'll be able to afford your bills, etc. In my experience, most freelancers will fail. It really aligns with the success rate from what I've seen, maybe a little bit higher, but of a lot of entrepreneurship ventures. So I think you can become, like, if you really want to get into freelancing down the road, I think getting professional experience, you can even start with like a product-based position. You're a developer, you're working full-time for a company, and then you can eventually transition into something like freelancing with better conventions, especially if you joined a team that did proper code reviews, and they shared their knowledge with you and wisdom, and then you took that, and now you could build a much better structured app that is a little bit scalable, depending on the type of project you want to work on. If your goal in the near future is to get a full-time developer as a software engineer, toss freelancing off your list. I don't think it's worth it. Okay. You could do like a single project if you want, go to a business, build a landing page for them or whatever, they need, but don't put all of your focus on that. What you can do with freelancing and what you can do with entrepreneurship will solidify once you actually get into the industry, and then you have to worry about your exit. I'm not sure it'd benefit you to worry about that now. And you might even consider joining a startup with like 100 employees, right? You're going to be a developer that's going to have conversations with design, product. You're going to pick up things and you're going to be a little bit more involved in the business. And I think that's a really beneficial place to be if your end goal, your exit is entrepreneurship.
All of this made a ton of sense to me. Building up skills before branching out into becoming an entrepreneur or going into the freelance world is going to be of much higher impact than if I had just started one or the other right off the bat instead of going into employment first. Even if I spend an extra year or two as an employee, for example, and then move on to freelancing or starting my own business, I'm going to have much more experience working with people, working through companies, understanding how small startups work maybe if I get involved in one, and I'll have a lot better view of the inside of how things work. So if I want to branch off and do my own thing, I have a good idea of what that looks like. Ultimately, there's a balance to strike here. You don't want to spend forever as an employee, and you don't want to jump into being an entrepreneur too quickly. Honestly, I don't even know if entrepreneurship is the way that I'm going to be going. I'm just kind of making sure that I have that door open in case I see an opportunity in the market and want to try to capitalize on it. But getting into entrepreneurship right away is going to lead to me trying to scramble for experience when I could just get that by working for a company or startup. This last piece of advice that he gave me is basically a recap of the first point, but I left it in here because of how important I think it is. Honestly, I think this first point that he made was one of the most important in the entire 30-minute interview, which you can watch on his channel, by the way.
I like that you're thinking ahead. I think you have the right mindset to make this coding bootcamp successful. You've put in a few months of self-taught work into just building yourself up as a developer. I just really want to reemphasize, do not toss yourself out of the coding bootcamp process too early. Be very careful about that. I see way too many graduates that'll pull themselves. They might not be happy. What you can do in the coding bootcamp is you can supplement. If you're not happy with how the coding bootcamp is teaching, it doesn't go into enough depth, for example, right? So you can supplement the weak parts of your coding bootcamp, but one of the worst things that you can do is toss yourself out of their process of learning completely and just like go solo and just apply for a bunch of companies and screw this coding bootcamp. That usually doesn't work out for people, and it's going to lengthen the amount of time to get that job.
The biggest reminder that I got from all of this is that I signed up for this bootcamp using my own judgment, and I should do myself a solid by trusting my own judgment. I'm doing my best now to shed off hesitations about what I'm going to be getting or not getting out of this bootcamp, and just trying to be in the moment, learn as I go, and identify shortfalls as I come across them. If there's deficiencies, I can address them through external studying or through mentorship. But spending time worrying now about deficiencies that haven't even shown themselves yet is just taking away from my ability to fully absorb the information now that I need as fundamentals. Don, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. It was really cool to get to know you and to get some advice from you. It was provided huge value, and I can't thank you enough. So if any of you are interested in becoming a developer, you have to be following Don. Don't sleep on Don. He's got great content, and he comes out with content every week. He does live streams, portfolio reviews, etc. You got to check him out. So with all of that, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more. I'm becoming a developer in 2023, and if you are doing that too, come along with me. See you later.